Distinguished delegates, good morning. May I ask you to please have your seats so we can start this meeting. I now call to order the third meeting of the 15th session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention to Combat Desertification. I would like to invite the committee to resume its consideration of Agenda Item 2B, Land Regulation Neutrality Target Setting Exercise. In this respect, before doing so, I would like to remind the delegates to please be as brief as possible. We are hoping that we have 20 speakers on the list, and we are hoping to get everything concluded, hear every speaker within 1 hour, so that we can catch up with some time that we lost yesterday. Mindful of the need for everyone to give the views and opinions, but we have to be also conscious of time, because we would like to complete our agenda during this CRIC. In this respect, I invite our moderator of the session, Ms. Pamela Chasik, to continue the interactive discussion under Agenda Item 2. Ms. Chasik, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I hope you all had a good evening. We will resume with the speakers list this morning, but first I have a few reminders. First, the speakers list is closed. However, we understand that some parties requested the floor, and we did not acknowledge them on the list that I read out yesterday. I have already heard from two, Nigeria and Swaziland. If there are any others, please let us know. The speakers list for this morning in order is as follows, and please press your buttons again as I call out your country's names so that they'll know to be able to put on the microphone. So the list is Uganda, Bangladesh, Peru, Chad, Georgia, Cameroon, Costa Rica, Nigeria, Ukraine, Guinea, Iraq, Swaziland, Guatemala, Thailand, Ghana, Belarus, Lebanon, Rwanda, and Trinidad and Tobago. The second reminder is that this is supposed to be an interactive panel. What we heard yesterday was really great, but we really hope that today's speakers will make points that reference the panelists' presentations or the statements of previous speakers. Third, yesterday the United States asked if any of the pilot countries have identified and committed to a target. In response to that, we learned yesterday from Italy that their LDN targets are going to be included in the National Strategy for Sustainable Development. They are also integrating the results in their National Climate Change Adaptation Plan and National Strategy for Sustainable Development, both of which are in the last stages of formulation. Another pilot country, Belarus, is on the speaker's list today and will address this in his intervention. We also have 2 pilot countries on the panel, Ethiopia and Grenada, and Armenia also wishes to respond. So with the plenary's indulgence, I would like to offer them the floor to quickly respond to the U.S.'s question. So I first give the floor to the State Minister from Ethiopia.
Thank you, moderator. As I said yesterday, Ethiopia government has prioritized landscape restoration as a key pathway for the sustainable development. In our case, restoring degraded land is a matter of life or death. We have a commitment to our community to improve their livelihood. So the commitment is not only for the international community, it is for our community also to improve their livelihood. That's why all targets are aligned with the National Action Program and endorsed as a national plan. It is a government commitment. It is endorsed by the parliament. So it is a part of our national commitment and endorsed as a national plan. This is a brief response to the question. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to give the floor briefly to the chair, who will be speaking in his national capacity.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I now speak as one of the countries that took part in the pilot. Now, as one of the small countries, the global data sets were not adequate for us to set what we call final targets. So we would have to get national specific data so that we can refine the targets that we set. After refining the targets, the intention is to integrate those targets into the NAP, because by doing this, we will submit the NAP to the Cabinet of Ministers for endorsement. There is a risk of submitting the targets as purely LDN targets, of it not getting endorsed. But if you submit it, integrate it into the NAP, then there's a greater chance that they would be endorsed by the Cabinet. So that's basically the process that we'll follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to give the floor briefly to the delegate from Armenia to respond as well.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Armenia is one of the 14 countries which participated in the pilot project on LDN up to 2015. The aim of this was to confirm the voluntary targets for LDN. We have to emphasize the limited nature of our resources, but we carried out an evaluation of our further work on voluntary targets at the national level. After we finished the project and the successful presentation of better data at COP12, we declared our readiness to participate in the second phase of this project, which will look at further work and confirmation of the voluntary LDN targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now resume the speakers list, and may I remind everyone again to be brief and interactive. I'd like to give the floor to Uganda.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Uganda, I wish to express our appreciation to the tremendous effort that has been put into the land degradation neutrality target setting initiative. I must say that we have also benefited from the technical support from the global mechanisms, and I believe that really it is important to appreciate the countries that have supported this effort. Because I feel that a lot has already been done, because we have already received guidelines, we have already had the training of our national experts, we have also got the technical support in form of consultants to work with us at national level, and we believe that the process as it is can actually be further enhanced by other regional initiatives, such as the GF land degradation monitoring project, which Uganda is also participating in. I believe that it is important that we anchor this process within existing processes, and Uganda has anchored the LDN target setting into our national sustainable land management program activities, and certainly we are looking at this as important to feed into in strengthening our sustainable land management strategic investment framework, as well as feed into the national planning process. Our understanding is that this process will add value to national planning. It will provide the data sets and also support decision-making in a better way on land issues. It will also enable us to strengthen our approach towards landscape approaches in managing our land resources, and will also stimulate integrated development initiatives. In this case, we believe that this land degradation approach should help us to have a clear picture of the status of our land resources, and also the change that will actually be happening. Secondly, we also believe that we should be able to quantify, to have a more quantitative monitoring of our land use related activities in order to be able to better monitor and better justify and better decisions. In addition, we expect that information should enable us to quantify the contribution of measures addressing land degradation, how these contribute to the achievement of sustainable development goals, as well as other measures. In particular, we believe this should contribute to a relationship between land degradation and food security, water quality, air quality, energy, and carbon sequestration, among others. I believe that without supporting transformational investment, the LDN target setting will not be doing much for countries such as Uganda that are impacted strongly by land degradation, yet we know that poverty and other challenges are still important. And therefore, we expect that we should be able to generate tools through this process that should be used as a source, to enable us source environmentally sustainable investments in land-based sectors. In addition, we expect that this should also lead to transformation of livelihoods of local communities, especially giving emphasis to issues of gender, ensuring that women and youth are also somehow integrated. And finally, we expect that this process should also help us to meet our obligations by providing information that is more effective and more measurable in terms of reporting to the UNCCD. I believe, therefore, this will require a lot of work in creating awareness, improving, building capacity, and technology transfer in order to achieve this. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much. We have noted that 2 additional countries who requested the floor yesterday and were not acknowledged will speak today, Cote d'Ivoire and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the speakers list is now closed. Next on our list is Bangladesh.
Good morning, and thank you, moderator. I have a very short question. As you know that many countries prepared national action program to address TLDD issues in their countries. Once we have LDN target setting, what will happen to the NAP?
Thank you very much. What? Yeah. Okay. We will collect questions and respond to them at the end. Our next speaker is Peru.
Buenos días.
Good morning. In the case of Peru, we will refer to the obligations of states parties that we need to analyze. Let's look at Article 5 and Article 9 of the Convention, or Article 9 of Annex 3 of the Convention. And in particular, letter F, which refers to effective participation at local, regional, and national participation of local and NGOs, including women's organizations, farmers' organizations, pastoral organizations, and other representative groups in the planning of policies, decision-making, and the revision of national action plans. This paragraph, which seems quite simple, nonetheless implies an enormous amount of work. And for this reason, it's very important to have a look at the progress we've undertaken since last year to update the National Action Plan, taking account of Decision 2 of COP9 that was carried out in Buenos Aires. It would be a good thing also, I think, to be aware on the party side of the need to update action plans taking account of that decision. Concerning land degradation neutrality, we think that it's important for this process to actually aid the execution of national action plans. In the case of Peru, a governmental decision was taken at the highest level to be part of the program for LDN, so as to contribute as a country to the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. This year, we approved legislation on the fight against desertification and drought with the Supreme Decree, which has as its main management and execution tool the action plan that I have referred to, which is a process document. And it needs to be continuously executed, taking account of the concepts and developments we see nationally and internationally. Nationally, for instance, we have budget programs which have been introduced in the context of the modernization law for the Peruvian state. We've had GEF and UNDP support to this end for $135,000. It's a small amount, but which has nonetheless helped us to strengthen the work that we do. All the different tasks that need to be carried out so that these actions can become a reality. It's also very important to emphasize, as we did yesterday, in broadening possible sources of finance. On this point, it's also important to bring out that in the context of these national action plans, in our case, we are concluding our integrated financial strategy so as to identify sources of financing both nationally and internationally, which could help to contribute to our process of fighting desertification nationally. This is a process we are developing with the participation of many sectors who are involved in this area and civil society. We have a national committee for the fight against desertification and drought. And periodically, we need to report back at the highest level of the government, the President and the Council of Ministers. The Ministry of the Environment chairs that committee. We set forth maps, and it's also important to emphasize the need to get support from specialized agencies for the application of the methodology. which has basically been developed in Argentina and Cuba, but also Ecuador. However, in Peru, we're a long way from having totally developed this, and we also need to go into greater depth in getting reliable data. We need to make quantitative progress here, and we hope we'll go on developing all of these areas. The efforts that we've made together with Ecuador and the peace agreement between our two countries should help. And we hope we will have international support to help us concretize the commitments we have made in the context of that peace agreement. All of these efforts are contributing to the national policy to fight desertification, which requires national, regional, and local efforts to be made. You will recall some of the aspects of the execution of this project. Often we don't explicitly talk about desertification, but there are things that are related to this, like reforestation, micro-reservoirs, water harvesting, and there have been hundreds of millions of dollars spent on this in the last years. And the target here is to have the most effective and efficient processes possible to channel those efforts and to arrive at full implementation of the convention. This should contribute to the strategic goals of the convention in this way. LDN, which is part of this worldwide program, will also help us to be more efficient in the use of our national resources and in establishing targets for LDN. We're going to make all necessary efforts to articulate this with other UN instruments in the framework, for instance, of climate change. And we hope that with our plan for LDN for 2017, we will be able to continue with this process of executing the program at national level with participation of civil society and international cooperation, as well as local players. This, in particular, in the case of international cooperation, we hope to go on with existing support from the FAO for development of methodology. And by way of conclusion, in the concrete case of the projects that I have already mentioned, we could also note that there are new operational aspects in the framework of new policies, such as land retention, for instance. This is something we are thinking about in the context of our national strategy to fight desertification. And so in any case, we will need support for this whole process. And to conclude, let me just remind you that this is part of a whole process of social targets. We mentioned women's rights before. Other social processes also taken time and effort, like eradication of slavery and other social rights, which we had to fight for. And all of this is part of a process. There's not just a magic wand you can wave and say, we'll have met all our goals. But we need to remember that this is all part of an ongoing process. And remember also the need to continue with these CRIC meetings every 2 years. That's all. Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to give the floor to Chad.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I would join our voice to those who have spoken before us in congratulating the presenters on this panel. I would like to support our colleague from Senegal. I'm speaking as a pioneer country. You know that the 14 countries from the pilot phase which prepared reports, the reports were validated in Ankara nearly a year ago. Other countries came and integrated LDN. After the validation of the document, each country went back to develop a national strategy so as to work in the field. Efforts were certainly made. But these efforts, you said that after the initial phase, we have to have phase 2. In phase 2, it was a question of preparing investment projects. Because now it's not a time for words, it's a time for action. We have to move to action, and 1 year later, the validation, although efforts have been made at the national level, we still haven't dealt with this. It's a good thing that the GM came to tell us about the new vision. And with regard to the workshop, the pilot countries noted 9 points for support at the national level. And these 9 points, I think that the report from our meeting should go to the Directorate General of GM so that they can examine these points and the report and support the countries so we can make progress, because we can't reach the 90 countries. We can't wait for the 90 countries to validate the programme before we make progress. We're rather marking time at the moment. Even the GEF 6, we had the remainder of that. Perhaps there should be some movement there to support African countries so they can make progress. Contributions also for the GM. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Georgia. Madam.
Okay. Thank you, Madam. Since this is the first time I'm taking the floor, let me express the gratitude to the government of Kenya for such an excellent organization of the meeting. On behalf of the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources Protection of Georgia, it is a pleasure for me to be here today and share success and bottlenecks of the implementation of land degradation neutrality target setting program in Georgia. Also, we have joined this initiative this year. I think we have managed to achieve quite an impressive progress. We have created high-level national working group serving as multi-stakeholder platform to lead the land degradation neutrality target setting process. We are happy to inform you that representatives of the different sectors and stakeholder groups at national as well as local level dedicated to contribute to the exercise and define land degradation neutrality target as part of the country's commitment to achieve sustainable development goals. In the same time, we do understand that it is a challenging task for the country, and in order to success, we have to mobilize internal and external resources, including financial one, and strengthen our capability. We support UNCCD Secretariat and global mechanisms. We do believe that during the meeting, all parties will work together to advance on the new strategy, providing guiding principles to achieve land degradation neutrality and show political commitment to start actions at ground level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I please give the floor to Cameroon?
Merci, Madame la modératrice.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, for giving us the floor. Like other speakers, Cameroon would like, first of all, to express its sincere thanks to the people of Kenya for their hospitality, their legendary hospitality. For Cameroon, we are totally committed to the implementation of the SDGs, and LDN helps to strengthen what we had already started doing in 2008 in the Green Sahel operation. With the support of the global mechanism, we are hoping to make progress in this regard. And here we would like to share with you what we intend to do. We are still at the embryo stage. That's why we also want what we want to do to be strengthened by the experience of those who have already done this. Cameroon is in Central Africa and has an area of more than 400,000 square kilometers, and is called an Africa in miniature because of its diversity, both with its population, its climate, its landscape, and its land. As far as its economy is concerned, the resources from land activities are more than half of our income, and this is why we have a great interest in combating land degradation and restoring degraded land. Since the recruitment of a consultant in September, we set a certain number of objectives with regard to mobilization. Of course, we shared with our consultant, our regional consultant, what we had to do, and we would like to repeat this here. Excuse me. From the policy point of view, we would like to prepare communication from the Minister of Environment, which would go to the Council of Ministers, on awareness of sustainable development in the two chambers of Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate. Awareness raising of local decentralized communities, including traditional chiefs with the support of the National Development Programme, and also utilize all opportunities provided by planning exercises and other strategies so as to create synergies with LDN. With regard to technical and financial partners, subject to the possibility of organizing special opportunities to communicate with regard to LDNs, we propose that we would make best use of our participation in meetings, bringing together relevant actors to discuss LDN. That is to say that we're going to give a presentation at the meeting, which will be held on the 21st to 26th of November in Kigali, on the Partnership for the Congo Basin, which brings together all partners from Central Africa in the area of sustainable forest management. On relations with civil society, and with them, we're going to have a meeting with them at the conference on dense forest ecosystems of Central Africa from the 31st of October to the 2nd of November in Douala. A presentation on LDNs will be given on that occasion. We are also invited by the Association of Traditional Practitioners in their meeting of the 28th of October to the 3rd of November in Yaoundé. With the universities and research associations, institutions, we have envisaged to bring in and interest master students to do their work on LDN at the level of communes. 3 students have already expressed their interest in doing this, and we're hoping to bring in a larger number of students from all regions of the country, so as to have a good basis, a good database, which can be used in target setting at the national level. We hope to take the opportunity to give consideration to the revision of the planning process, the use of space at the communal level, to propose the accomplishment of the 15.3 target as our aim. In prospect, or in conclusion, we'd like to say that the use of existing opportunities to integrate LDN discussion seems to be a good way of highlighting links, synergistic links, and leverage. This calls for a minimum to develop communications material in terms of posters and videos and so on, and to permit the mobility of the focal point and the consultants who have to be the bearers of the message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to once again remind speakers to please be brief, because we still have about 12 more speakers left on our list. I'd like to give the floor now to Costa Rica.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Costa Rica made the decision to participate in the LDN program in 2014, in the pilot phase decided by the Secretariat. And this decision was made at the highest political level in our country. Costa Rica has an advisory committee on soil, an interinstitutional committee, which is meant to advise the ministries of agriculture and in energy and on the implementation of the convention. This committee is also in charge of coordination on LDN matters. Our involvement with the LDN program is being done simultaneously with our national strategy. And we would like, for that reason, to take this idea of the fight against land degradation in the context of national legislation and the importance of national legislation so as to be in accordance with sustainable development goals, as we heard from presenters yesterday. As signatory countries, we are obliged to meet these requirements. However, we have methodological doubts as to the goal-setting process. This is very important at national level, but there's a very high measurement cost. And in specific areas, we have the impression that the methodology is not, in fact, very refined. We agree with many delegations and with the text of the convention that the important thing in LDN should not be the definition of targets, but rather implementation through good practices and with necessary resources available. To that end, we note with concern things we have heard about the LDN fund, where it is foreseen that private financing be used as loans for countries via transformatory projects. Madam Moderator, esteemed delegates, we should not lose sight of the fact that LDN in our countries is principally generated by our poor rural populations, small-scale farmers practicing subsistence agriculture on a very small scale. Those farmers do not have the possibility to have access to credit or loans. We are thankful to German development authorities who are cooperating with us on practical methodologies so as to arrive at methodologies for LDN, which will allow us properly to monitor the subject and to make the political class more aware of this so they can insert this concern in national planning. The national plan in Costa Rica, as I indicated earlier, was worked out in 2004. And this program establishes that the geographical area that is being dealt with as the basic unit for LDN. We've also defined degraded areas, which have allowed us to have focus from GEF 5. We are also dealing with another project along the same lines. This has allowed us to continue in a second, more degraded geographic area on the basis of the lessons already learned. In that project, we are applying the subject of LDN from the concept to practice at farm level in the two areas that we have chosen. The application of the principle of land degradation neutrality at the level of the smallest production levels, such as a parcel of land farmed by a small farmer or a farm, allows us to work in a different way than we can in conventions such as the climate change or biodiversity conventions. When dealing with individual farms, we cannot separate farmers from the activities of the three conventions. A conservation policy for soils or forests would not allow us to exclude farmers' contribution to the preservation of flora and fauna or of soil or of forest cover. So we can see here that it's very important to deal with the different Rio conventions as we do with international organizations such as FAO, who are represented in our countries. We're grateful to World Mechanisms for this idea and for the exchange on paradigms concerning LDN, and we hope that all of this will be expressed by the search for and mobilization of timely and sufficient resources which will help us to solve the problem of desertification and land degradation in our countries. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to give the floor to Nigeria.
Thank you, moderator, and good morning all. Nigeria is one of the countries participating in the target setting process. We were at Konya for the inception workshop. This process is very important to Nigeria because Nigeria's land degradation problem is very enormous and affects all the three regions. Each region with a peculiar problem, which I cannot enumerate here for time. Also, with our government diversifying the economy from the oil to agriculture, We believe that that will bring more land degradation. That's why this process is very important to us. Yes, we've kickstarted the process, and we have a high government commitment to the process. That can be corroborated by the UNCCD with the visit of Monsieur Allen to Nigeria in September, where we were able to arrange a meeting with the permanent secretary and the minister, the state minister for environment. And the commitment of the government was reiterated there. Really, in Nigeria, we have been able to identify many transformative projects that are being developed. One in mind is the one anchored by a cement company, Lafarge, in collaboration with a state government and the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority to transform a degraded forest reserve, which is about 107,000 kilometers square. And in it, Lafarge, during the meeting when Align came and we met with the minister, reiterated its commitment to that project, and the government was happy about it. Lafarge further said we should identify in the rest of the two regions projects of that magnitude. Also, we have had proposals from many private companies now to develop such projects. So my advice to those that are in the pilot and have already set their target, you need not wait. You can reach out to private companies and get such transformative project, and I think it's possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ukraine.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. We understand that accomplishing the SDGs is first and foremost a task at the national level. The concept of LDN for us is first and foremost the possibility of raising to a higher level the priority of questions of combating land degradation. What should we do in this regard? In March, the government of Ukraine confirmed the National Action Plan for LDN and desertification. One of the measures that we took under this, that we have under this plan, is working out methods to achieve LDN. In May, the government in Ukraine, with the participation of the UNDP office and other UN organizations, began the process of support to the government of Ukraine in the harmonization of the SDGs in line with national conditions and circumstances. We had a series of national and subnational consultations. The Ministry of the Environment, which is responsible for, is the focal point for the CCD in Ukraine, was actively involved in the process, putting forward the idea of LDN. As a result of these consultations, they will be brought into the National Development Strategy, and we will also use this in the preparation of the cooperation project between Ukraine and the UN for the forthcoming 5-year period. That is to say, understanding the priority responsibility of the national stakeholder, we understand the importance of developing partnerships in this context. The programme of support for the setting of national targets on LDN is extremely important. And we thank the Secretariat of the Global Mechanism of the CCD and all of our partners for the development of this programme. The fact that we join this process of 102 countries is a very important argument for LDN goals at the national level. We've only had expert support so far. We're going to have a coordinating centre to combat land degradation and desertification, and it's very important to note that the support in the framework of these programmes was more flexible with regard to the needs of the countries. For example, countries need to have the possibility to use the financial resources, not only for the two events proposed by the global mechanism, the workshop and the field trips, but also there are other needs that need to be covered in line with national particularities. There's the question of monitoring, there's the need for awareness, there's the need for appropriate scientific work, and so on. And of course, in the future, it will be very important to bring about mobilization of appropriate, adequate financial resources from various sources, national, international, from various development partners. It's very important to have cooperation in the preparation of these large-scale investment and other projects that we'll be having in accomplishing LDN. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. We are now running into overtime, so I'm going to urge the remaining speakers once again to be brief. Our next speaker is Guinea.
Guinée. Okay. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mr. Chairman, please allow me first of all to thank the Director General of the mechanism and all of the people who work on the mechanism for the results that have already been obtained in mobilizing resources for LDN, and for their efforts in supporting countries interested in the process, including mine, the Republic of Guinea. Referring to the document that was presented to us, I'd like to mention consciousness raising, which is particularly important in meeting our goals on LDN. This aspect, I think, is correctly considered as part of this. Guinea is one of the countries that will be called upon to quite soon begin defining voluntary LDN goals. And we should profit from this opportunity to make LDN better known nationally. Since LDN is a new concept, I would like to encourage the international mechanism, because yesterday, when we were leaving this room, we saw that where we were with the document, I would like them to go on producing documents, especially for decision makers, technical experts, civil society, and schools. And I hope that this kit, if it is made available to focal points, will be a useful tool that will let national focal points train and inform others, and to make the necessary plea for LDN to all players concerned. Madam Moderator, I'd like to be optimistic, and we hope the difficulties that pioneer countries have encountered will be rapidly surmounted. For us, the recent arrivals, we hope to be able to get started rapidly on the ground with the necessary activities after validation of our national strategies for LDN. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to Iraq.
I think it's on. Okay. Thank you, Madam Moderator, to give me the floor. From Iraqi perspective, as we severely affected on the issue of the land degradation, we found that LDN setting target is a multiple partner initiative and such an essential and co-benefit tool for employing and for restoring area to achieve sustainability of land, and it is such as a comprehensive way to minimize our land degradation. It is because it is a synergistic linkages to three conventions: biodiversity, climate change, and desertification. It is start from what we have to move from theory to practice, and starting with our involvement in the LDN setting target, we are pleased to have this opportunity and starting putting a concrete our basin line with a great interest and establishing the leverage plan, identifying the hotspot on the multiple area. However, convincing decision makers and high political level, raising their awareness to adopt the LDN target to have public and private investment, enhancing their policy and create political action on national level is required. Also, the knowledge gap need to be considered. A big need for capacity building to build a setup project. Further UN agencies' involvement is required for technical and financial support. Media assistance is also crucial to express the country's situation and their experience and lesson learned from different society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Swaziland.
Oh, thank you, moderator. And let me start by thanking the panelists that made some presentations yesterday. And having said that, Madam Moderator, I'm sorry to say that we are supposed to be having an interactive dialogue, but we seem to be having lengthy country statements, which are not helping us much. But then one thing I would like to bring to this forum is that we believe that the LDN process is one program that can help us in achieving target 15.3 as expected from the UN. Chairperson, let me thank the Secretariat and the GM for the effort they are putting into the LDN target setting process, but I would bring caution and say it's pointless to invest money on a program that cannot sustain itself. Because if you do not link the target setting process to the actual implementation of the programs that will achieve the target, it's pointless. It's like money being thrown into the sea. So what I'm saying, Madam Moderator, is that we need to connect the LDN target setting process with the implementation of those programs that will achieve those programs. Hence, the need to connect this process with the ongoing IWG work on the new strategy. Madam Moderator, we talk of finance as a challenge. To me, I think we have enough finance in the world. The only problem is where we put those finances. I'm sorry to say is that I have made observations that the GEF seems to be a free-for-all. We have a lot of initiatives which are not coordinated. Institutions picking 3 or 4 countries running with them. In this regards, I think if we have one program, we need a coordinated program by all stakeholders, by all institutions. Let's have one cake, and then each institution comes and cut a piece from that cake that is coordinated by the GM, instead of hearing a lot of initiative but aiming at the same resources. Having said that, Chair, we also need to hear the commitment of our partners. We are in a convention where there are partners which have pledged to support the implementation of programs. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to Guatemala.
Bien, muchas gracias.
Many thanks to everyone. Madam Moderator, Mr. Chairman, dear delegates. It's an honor for me to be here with you today, sharing with all of you some of the experiences of the country which I represent, Guatemala. Initially, I'd like to bring out that in each community or region of the world, the dynamic of the desertification process and the increasing degradation of soil, as well as the effects of drought on ecosystems, is different. And for that reason, we see there are many different factors we ought to mention, including farming in each country, culture, the way they produce things, among many other things. All of this will concern the anthropogenic activities that we see in different areas. And they will also affect natural resources, degrading them. And as we know, the worst affected of all are soil, water, and forests, which are continually degraded in these processes. My country is not an exception to this, and I would like to tell you very briefly about some of the impacts of these phenomena that affect our society, among which we could mention the loss and degradation of soil and the forests, reduction of the aquifers, reduction of the quality of air and water, change in the landscape, and conflicts over water use, rural and urban migration patterns, and the impact on populations, including increasing vulnerability, food insecurity, less access to basic resources, increase in the price of farming products in the basket of daily basic consumption goods. All of these things make it difficult for a country to develop. Guatemala is a small country in size, just 108,000 square kilometers, and it's a very diverse country in spite of that small size. It has 14 different areas of different nature, 38 volcanoes, 34 different geographic areas, many different native species. In spite of all of this, diversity may be lost in a very near future. And that's why we need carefully to manage the natural resources of our country. To give you an example of this, in Guatemala, 90% of rivers are polluted. We also saw that the extension of forest was 75% of the total territory some years ago, and today that figure has fallen to 38%. And that's extremely worrying for us as a country. These forests are mostly in protected areas. And so, as we can observe, we have very serious environmental problems. Some waters that carry huge amount of industrial waste are depositing them along the places where the rivers flow. And some of the prettiest places in Guatemala are going to be converted into rubbish dumps in the very near future. That's just one example. As to drought, the prolongation of the dry period in Guatemala is continually increasing, especially in the area we call the dry corridor. This dry corridor covers 12,000 square kilometers, which represents 11% of our national territory. According to the Ministry of Agriculture and Food of Guatemala, there have been losses in the farming sector from 1997, 1998, 2004, 2009, 2012, 2014, and 2015. And this year, 2016, will not be an exception. As we see, drought has had considerable negative impact over the last decade in Guatemala. This phenomenon affected almost 200,000 families in 2014, 175,813 in 2015, and production of basic grains also dropped considerably in 2014 and continued in 2015. Guatemala carried out a study and an economic evaluation of land degradation carried out by the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in 2011 and determined that in the country, 76,000 metric tons of productive soil was lost every year because of the direct effect of erosion, largely due to water. This represents a loss of something like $8.5 million, higher than the budget or of revenue for that sector in the country, which was approved in 2011. And as we see, the situation is of grave concern for our country. These events have great impact in different regions of the country, and we wish to reverse them. But since in Guatemala, and I think that's the same case for many of the countries represented here, there are not sufficient financial resources to implement the necessary means to achieve our LDN goals. That's why we want to have national targets, and we will not be able to do this unless we have an adequate financial strategy which is adapted to the dynamic of each region. And I think this is something that we all know. Guatemala has a good outlook and good possibilities for the country. Our ministry has a specific department for fighting desertification and drought, and in the framework of UNCCD, we are working on this process. Each member state of the convention needs to go forward with its vision and meet each target proposed to each of us as a country, as a region, and as a part of our planet, and to deal with the welfare of this planet, which we all share. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. We're rapidly running out of time, so I urge the final 7 speakers to be as brief as possible. Thailand, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, Thailand would like to express our appreciation to the Secretariat and GM to support our LDN target setting program. And we received important opportunity to host the LDN TSP workshop for Asia and Pacific countries in Bangkok during 12 to 13 July of 2016, and we got a fruitful results of technical guidelines for implementations and valuable discussion on the way to leverage the LDN. Recently, there is a resource of survey as a part of ELD project implementation in Thailand to assess the perceptions of LDN among local officers and farmers. From 83 of respondents, we found that only 10% of respondents know about LDN, but 90% don't know or haven't heard about LDN at all. This is not wrong because we just start few activities on awareness of LDN. However, when we ask them to explain LDN in their own definitions or understanding, it is interesting that the practice on soil and water conservation, soil improvements, and SLM measures are the key answers received from them. In this regard, in local perception in this moment, they might not understand what is LDN, and the terms and definition might be difficult for them, but exactly they need to restore degraded soil or land to increase their productivity and sustainable land use. Therefore, the action to halt land degradation that they are doing in their land is intensively served to the achievements of LDN. Then we would like to ask the Secretary to consider the support of these key actors on the ground in awareness raising, capacity building activity, or technology transfer to strengthen them as they are in the crucial implementer of LDN achievement. Ladies and gentlemen, to promote LDN in the country, Thailand could gain benefit from existing cooperation, either bilateral cooperations, regional cooperation, and cooperation projects with JEF agencies, such as the project on decision support for mainstreaming and scaling up of sustainable land management, and global soil partnership initiated by FAO, or current ongoing land degradation project under JEF 6 with UNDP. Finally, Thailand would like to request the Secretariat for continuing support affected countries in terms of indicator development in national level, resource persons, and capacity building in LDN implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to Ghana.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I am glad to inform you that Ghana signed up to the LDN concepts, and the target setting process is ongoing steadily. We are happy to know that we've been able to win government commitment to support the process, and this is evidenced in the fact that even this year we are making contributions into the national budget so that funds could be allocated to support the LDN. There is a concern as we are developing the LDN target setting. The concern from various participants is the JEF allocation to the various three conventions. If you look at how much goes into the land degradation sector, it is very, very meager as compared to the various sectors. And yesterday, during the panel discussion, it was clear to us why that contribution. We realized that the panelists, Jeff made mention of building synergies through restoring forests. The concern from our end is the main issue for our farmers or for the smallholder farmer is food to put on his table. So if we're able to concentrate on restoring forests without restoring their farmlands, where there will be improved soil fertility that will reflect in food security and eventually household food security and all that. The farmer is going to leave that restored, degraded land. The farmer is going to leave that degraded land and then encroach on the restored forest. We are picking these lessons from a project we are implementing, Sustainable Land and Water Management Project, which is eventually being sponsored by the JEF. You realize that farmers do what they call drawdown farming. They move towards where they can get soil fertility, improve soil fertility, and eventually moisture. And so they encroach on river banks. And so what we're doing now is that we're trying to restore the integrity of the buffer zones of these rivers and make sure that we restore their farmlands. So they are gradually moving away from encroaching on the riparian vegetation of these rivers and are now going back onto their farms where they can make a living out of it. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to Belarus.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Belarus is amongst the 14 pilot project countries. In the implementation, we've had a very limited effort since we've only had 3 or 4 months on this, so the number of tasks to be dealt with at a high state level has not yet been accomplished. However, one aim we have accomplished, which has clearly shown that in looking at LDN, this is very important for us, and we need to have resources and we need to have data from national and other sources. In concrete terms, in Belarus, from the question from the USA to CRIC 15, we can say that our country on LDN is already included this in the national strategy under the CCD, which was confirmed by the government of Belarus, and we have reflected a number of the targets here. In implementation of the strategy, under the chairmanship of the Ministry of the Environment of Belarus, we have a council which brings together all of the stakeholders and have prepared a plan of priority measures which is being approved by the Coordinating Council. However, we have only taken our very first steps. There's a great deal of work still to be done. And this process needs to be flexible, and we don't exclude the possibility that the approaches that we have developed will have to be further refined in order to accomplish our targets in the framework of the LDN, and also decisions taken by the Conference of Parties. I'd like to note that at the present time, we don't know how to organize the procedure with regard to our commitments under LDNs and at the international level, and this is something we'll be discussing at COP13. And we need to say that in the pilot project, we saw that there were considerable possibilities for synergy for LDN. We've carried out activities in the field, which makes it possible for us to accomplish several tasks at once. The whole land degradation process and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving ecosystems, and improving restoration of natural resources, and preventing economic damage have all been involved. This work is important not only from the point of view of LDN, but also climate change, since our country has adhered to the Paris Agreement, and we must continue to identify solutions with synergistic effects. As far as the pilot project is concerned, you have to understand that this has been a kind of test which has shown that in principle it is possible to bring in LDN targets. We need to deal with global sources here, but in doing this, we need to have a strategy for accomplishment, which will be comprehensible to all interested parties. We very much hope that participation in the program to support for LDN targets will make it possible for countries to develop effective measures for accomplishing these tasks. Taking account of national potential in this regard and monitoring and other such issues, we need to integrate questions of LDN into the strategic documents at the national level so that this problem area should not only be involved in CCD documents, but also taken into account in the preparation of integrated documents relating to the accomplishment of SDGs. the strategy of social and economic development of the country, and also sectoral strategies and agriculture and so on. In our country, we're trying to do this. It's important to include the question of LDN in international structures. In this connection, we feel that additional measures on mobilization of additional resources for the implementation of LDNs are important, so that all countries, participant countries, including pilot countries, should have appropriate support to effective organization of the process, not only of the establishment of LDN targets, but also to accomplish these targets. I should like to support the expression of the concern expressed by the representative of Costa Rica with regard to the principle of funds for LDN. Most measures for land degradation don't find a rapid solution, and it will be difficult for countries to have appropriate funds. We understand that we're only at the beginning of the path on LDN here. We need to have further mobilization at the national level, as well as by multilateral partners and donors who must make LDN a priority. The global mechanism and the CCD and its institute should be important here. Countries are beginning work. What they do over the next 2 years will largely depend on this, and we must not squander the opportunity which we now have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've been informed that Burkina Faso will speak on behalf of Côte d'Ivoire, so I'll give the floor to Burkina Faso.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'd like to thank Kenya for their hospitality, and also thank the Global Mechanism and the Secretariat for the efforts that they have already carried out in the implementation of LDN. However, we still have some concerns and need for clarification. I also share the concern expressed by Swaziland on the panel, which ought to perhaps have been interactive, because there are many concerns that we have, and it's certain that the responses will not be able to be in sufficient detail when we are in need of clarification. As you're aware, Burkina Faso is a country which has is more than 30% degraded for its land, and the agricultural population numbers 80%, which does not indeed manage to feed itself or feed the country. That means that there is food insecurity because of the strong degree of land degradation. So it's a very serious concern for the highest authorities. And I'd also like to say, we have concerns because for a certain time, there are hundreds of square kilometers of construction going on in the country. And it's one of the greatest producers of cotton, so land resources are extremely important. To launch the LDN procedure in Burkina Faso, there needs to be general mobilization at all levels, and so far, we're seeing that there are nevertheless problems in getting the process going. We have our consultant who's already been engaged and who has started to work. A working group is in the process of being set up. The government is informed about this. A very high-level supervisory committee is going to be set up, but how all this is going to function still needs to be determined. As you're aware, in Burkina Faso, good sustainable land management practices have had their effect at the present time. There is a partnership program for sustainable land management financed by the GEF, which is in its pilot phase and is concluding, and we have had quite positive results. So we have to upscale this sustainable land management. This cannot be successful in a country like Burkina Faso without massive investment. On our part, we would like the generic roadmap adopted by the global mechanism for the countries should be adapted and budgeted. The problem is there, how much this LDN process will cost. The consultant has begun to work with the focal points who are precisely the drivers of this process are in place. We've got the vehicle, but we might not have the fuel unless there's co-financing from the other technical and financial partners. The global mechanism, I don't think will be able alone to do everything. So that's our concern on the resources. What is going to happen so as we can implement really the process by September 17. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have really run out of time, but I will allow the final three speakers that we announced this morning to speak. Lebanon, you have the floor. Please be brief.
Good morning. Lebanon is currently benefiting from a UNEP GEF support for the NAP alignment process, along with the GM UNCCD supported LDN target setting process. This will allow us to integrate the LDN national targets with the NAP and further the SDG implementation plans. The LDN process comes at very critical moment as several important programs and initiatives are taking place in sustainable land management, along with challenges and difficulties caused by the unstable political situation in the country and in the region. While working on the target setting program, LDN projects and programs are being implemented, such as the UNDP GEF project on mountain ecosystems that will soon be launched. LDN concerns are being included in the latest version of the National Forest Program. Lebanon is implementing a 40 million trees project with the support of several international organizations. A national fund is being created with the support of FAO. The Forest Landscape Restoration Mechanism is being implemented. The private sector is very active investing in agriculture, mainly in grape for wine production, in olive production, and in other fruit trees. The target setting program will provide the strategic framework for the implementation of all these initiatives and any more. It will facilitate the identification of areas for priority intervention in a close articulation with the other sectoral investments. During our work, we will make good use of the information provided through the FAO process on forest resources assessment reporting and other available information. The program will contribute to the achievement of the commitments assumed under UNFCCC and CBD, as a very strong partnership is being created with FAO, UNDP, GEF, and other organizations and agencies for mainstreaming LDN issues into ongoing and planned programs related to sustainable land management, sustainable agriculture, food security, and land use planning. The program will also provide guidelines for the private sector for the implementation of sustainable agriculture practices under the principles for responsible investment in agriculture and food system endorsed by the World Committee on Food Security. In this context, we would like to emphasize on the biophysical aspects and on livelihood and population well-being through reversing the negative trends of unsustainable land use practices and implementing transformative sustainable agriculture, pastoral, and forest practices. However, Lebanon is suffering from the effects of unstable political situation in the region and hosts hundreds of thousands of refugees and migrants, increasing the pressure of the local agriculture, rangelands, and forest ecosystems, and ultimately on the land resource LDN targets should integrate this stringent reality. We support the further involvement of the grant of FAO, UNDP, UNEP, GEF, and other UN agencies and international partners in advancing the LDN process both in methodological development and in the implementation process to make best use of available and new and current global data, information and technical expertise that are already helping sustainability and productivity of our agriculture, pastoral and forest system. We look forward for a strong partnership between the UN agency and international partners in delivering on food security and land degradation neutrality at the national level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rwanda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Moderator. In Rwanda, we are keen on seeing LDN become operational because, as you know, we have we have committed to restore 2 million hectares in the process of forest landscape restoration. So LDN is coming as a booster to this process. We already have a small project, a pilot project of dealing with 18,000 hectares. And we think LDN, which is cross-cutting, will come to boost this. This will be the real synergy talked about by the general manager of the global mechanism yesterday. We had already had some SLM projects, sustainable land management projects, but they were dealing with mainly agriculture, but LDN is coming as a cross-cutting, and it will be helping us. In Rwanda, we have already concluded June this year a national forest inventory, so we know what places degraded, and this national forest inventory will be the basis of improved forest management through regeneration of degraded areas. Again, LDN will enhance the conspicuousness of the UNCCD, thus improving the synergies. Now, to conclude, we would like to request the GM to keep documenting on the best practices, the challenges encountered, and the amendments and the suggestions given to members on how best we can set our voluntary LDN targets, because as you know, this can be different from country to country. We see it good if regional consultants and national consultants, as well as government, are involved in this process of setting land degradation neutrality targets. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Trinidad and Tobago, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As per your directive, I'll try to deliver this as slowly as I can. Since this is our first intervention, Trinidad and Tobago wishes to thank the people and government of the Republic of Kenya, the UNCCD Secretariat, and the panel presenters for facilitating this session of the CRIC. As a new entrant in the LDN target setting program, Trinidad and Tobago views this as a very ambitious and challenging initiative. Being a small island developing state that faces perennial problems with floods, landslides, and forest fires, it's quite clear that there is scope for LDN as a modality to compensate for the loss or degradation of land resources. The target setting program represents an opportunity to recruit a wide range of stakeholders from the private sector, community-based organizations, and various government agencies to address common land management issues which affect us at national and local levels. Furthermore, LDN could be the catalyst to build greater momentum for the implementation of this convention in Trinidad and Tobago, because sadly, it lags behind climate change and biodiversity, both in terms of mainstreaming in policy and legislation, as well as the allocation of resources for implementation. In fact, if Trinidad and Tobago can successfully achieve LDN, benefits would cascade toward meeting our nationally determined contributions under the UNFCCC and the attainment of the Aichi targets under the CBD, not to mention the potential economic advantages to be gained from increased land productivity and disaster resilience. Trinidad and Tobago recognizes that LDN is part of a paradigm shift which would form a major element of the post-2018 strategy. We also appreciate that initiation and implementation of LDN is a national responsibility which is integral to good governance and a direct translation of Target 3 of SDG 15, which we have adopted. There are, however, some concerns. Whilst target setting is of vital importance, focus should not be lost for finding and assigning adequate resources in a timely fashion for practical solutions to achieving sustainable land management, in addition to LDN. And I think this is a sentiment we share with our colleagues from Brazil. The LDN TSP would require monitoring, evaluation, and reporting, which would be an additional obligation to the mandatory reporting that would inevitably accompany a post-2018 strategy. For SIDS with limited human and financial resources, this is a significant commitment, especially when past experiences are considered. We're under no illusions. LDN would be difficult to attain and would not occur in the short term. For least developed countries, it would have to start small and then be upscaled. The modalities and mechanisms by which transformative projects would be implemented would not be a simple process. In our instance, it would require some degree of institutional and systemic flexibility. There's also the issue of persuasion of the private sector. Utilizing legal instruments should be a last resort to gaining their participation, and as such, we urge the Secretariat to provide models or soft approaches for winning the support of corporate entities. Similarly, private investment or input must be able to see a clear path to a return on investment in a reasonable time frame, especially if this investment comes from a source external to where the program is being implemented. Trinidad and Tobago is in the final stages of aligning its NAP, which has been a problem given the length of time it has taken. At this point, it is now starting to look more like a blessing, since it would permit the draft NAP to incorporate land degradation neutrality as a major component. Since our NAP is a cabinet-approved program, it must undergo a national consultation process. Consequently, this could provide an opening to ventilate LDN to the wider public and reinforce endorsement at the highest political level. Trinidad and Tobago wishes to reiterate that LDN is a positive initiative being promoted by this convention. Certainly, obstacles would be met in this effort, but we believe that LDN would evolve and adapt as the process unfolds with increasing participants and the increased availability of improved technological methods. Lastly, Trinidad and Tobago intends to work closely with our regional coordinating unit, the Partnership Initiative for Sustainable Land Management, the PISLM, the regional consultant, and the global mechanism to gain the necessary technical backstopping to materialize a plausible roadmap towards the LDN goals and targets. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We have reached the end of the speakers list as communicated at the beginning of this session, and due to the lack of time, we cannot accommodate any other speakers. I would like to give the floor briefly to the global mechanism to respond to 3 questions that were raised during this morning.
Actually, it's going to be 5, but I'm going to be very short. There was a question from Bangladesh in the beginning, what's the role of the NAP in the context of LDN? I looked at the independent evaluation of NAPs 2015, and there's 3 main conclusions. A NAP needs to be more than a document, a NAP needs to create leverage, and a NAP needs to have focus. The LDN target creates the focus for the NAP. So the NAP is an implementing vehicle for the target setting, or for the target, and I strongly encourage that the NAP is not a silo NAP, but that our NAP is closely aligned with the other NAP, the adaptation plan, and other relevant documents and processes, as many speakers have actually raised. Second, there was a question from Costa Rica on methodology. In this context, let me clarify, the LDN target setting program is a multi-partner initiative supported by 17 partners and a joint initiative between the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism, spearheaded by the Global Mechanism. But everything related to data and quality of data is actually taken care by the Secretariat. And I would like to invite my colleague Sarah to actually quickly touch upon the point on methodology.
Thank you very much. So let me clarify in very simple terms what is the approach that parties have agreed upon for reporting and that therefore we are also using for target setting. National data are the primary source of data for reporting. There is no doubt about this. In the absence of this data, the Secretariat, in collaboration with technical partners, will make available some national estimates derived from global data sources. These are intended as a fallback option, so simply as a service that is provided to the parties. Parties have the authority and the liberty to validate this data and use them, but also to reject them and not to report if they don't feel that these data are reliable enough or they don't represent accurately the national reality. So there is no, let me reassure you, there is no intention from our side or from the side of technical partners to force any data on you. Maybe just an additional small point to respond to Trinidad and Tobago on the reporting burden added by LDN. There is a very good alignment between the indicator approved for a strategic objective 1 to 3, which are likely to remain in the new strategy, and the indicator used for target setting. So the additional reporting burden should not be very heavy on the countries.
Thank you very much. There was also a question by Costa Rica about the role of the LDN fund and the role of private investment, which then also was touched upon by Nigeria and I believe Trinidad and Tobago. Just to be very clear, the LDN fund is one financing vehicle, is going to be one financing vehicle in the context of the broader financing vehicles already out there. What is clear is there is a need to mobilize private sector resources if we want to achieve a land degradation neutral world by 2030, and encourage actually parties to follow the call from Nigeria to reach out to private sector actors in the context of a target setting process early on. Finally, there was, not finally, but there was from Guinea a request to have a document for decision makers, which was echoed by many other interventions about the need to raise awareness and to bring this to the most senior decision makers. As part of the LDN target setting, we will produce a profile, a high-level profile for each country, 3 pages only, summarizing what is already there, out there in terms of documents and in terms of studies, drawing from work from the economics of land degradation initiative, drawing of the work from the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity initiative, and drawing on the work and actually participation of 60+ parties to our convention in the wealth accounting and valuation of ecosystem services. So each party will be provided with a short high-level summary. What do we know in this country about making the economic case why there should be more investments for LDN? Ulrich, there was a question on CHEF related to the allocation of CHEF resources. Could you please take this question?
Yes, I noted concerns of several voiced by several countries with regard to CHEF resources allocation. First of all, I fully agree with Ghana's points that food security is very important. In fact, we have in GEF 6 our food security integrated program, which invests more than 100 million in sub-Saharan Africa on food security. So it's already a priority, and it's very likely that it will be also a priority in the future. I did not want to create the impression that forest restoration is a big focus. It's one of the priorities. There are several priorities, and food security is, of course, still a very high priority. Again, also the point of Burkina Faso on upscaling SLM, this is also one where high priority.
in the strategy and goals of the land degradation focal area objectives in GEF 6. And we see that the GEF investments with the countries also as a long-term partnership with the countries. I mean, we are already now in the 6th replenishment, and those investments, they need to build on each other and try to come up with a strategic approach in addressing environmental problems in the countries. And some of the countries are actually very good examples on how they build over time in a long-term investment strategy on GEF resources. Ghana, Burkina Faso are actually very good examples for this. And then finally, I think what we need to do is to work together towards GEF 7 so that some of the concerns can be addressed in the new replenishment of the GEF in GEF 7. The replenishment process is now starting. It will be officially announced now in our next council meeting. So from now within the next year, actually, until the next COP in China, there will be 1 year of a process of replenishment discussions, and all the countries can influence their respective council members that sit on the GEF Council to influence the GEF replenishment number 7 in the best possible way. But one outlook I can already give for this is that integrated approaches will really be important to make best use and most effective use of limited resources, because resources will always be limited, and we have to find ways of how to create multiple benefits from investments, so that we can really say the integration and multiple benefits will be a necessity to make the most effective use of limited resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to sum up the dialogue that we've had over the past 2 days. First, there seems to be a general agreement in the room that LDN can create opportunities and improve implementation of the convention. But to make this happen, we need political leadership, technical competence, baseline data, capacity building and joint learning, partnerships, and financial support. Second, LDN also provides an opportunity for greater synergies at the national level to implement the 3 Rio conventions, including the Aichi biodiversity targets, as well as implementation of the SDGs. In fact, as UNDP said yesterday, LDN is an SDG accelerator and is crucial in achieving the SDGs and targets on poverty eradication, women's rights, food and water security, forests, and biodiversity. Third, to make this happen, it's important to integrate LDN targets into the existing national action plans and identify innovative sources of finance, as well as to educate governments and people about the ideas of LDN. LDN must be an interdisciplinary effort that involves both horizontal cooperation across ministries, as well as vertical cooperation from the national level down to the local level, including local communities, farmers, and other small landholders. LDN is indeed a paradigm shift, but to many in this room, we see that LDN can be a positive initiative for the UNCCD. So I'd like to give the floor briefly to the Global Mechanism before we close.
Just to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to the leadership of those countries who have embarked on the LDN exercise, and thank you for an excellent, excellent dialogue over the last 24 hours. I started with saying that if I would need to summarize LDN, it's one word: opportunity. I learned 3 more words during the last 24 hours. LDN is an opportunity. LDN is a necessity, as we heard from the GEF, to achieve the SDGs. And I would add, to mobilize more resources. LDN is a booster, Rwanda, and LDN is a catalyst, Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I'd now like to turn over the session back to the chair.
Distinguished delegates, we have thus concluded the discussion on agenda item 2B. On behalf of the committee and the UNCCD Secretariat, I would like to thank our moderator, our panelists, and all delegations for actively participating in the interactive discussions. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to turn its attention to agenda item 3, future implementation of the convention. Sub-item A, initial findings from the Intergovernmental Working Group, for which you have before you the report by the Intergovernmental Working Group on the future strategic framework of the convention, contained in document ICCD/CRIC 15/2, entitled Initial Findings from the Intergovernmental Working Group on the Future Strategic Framework of the Convention. I first invite Mr. Stephen Muwaya from Uganda, the co-chair of the Intergovernmental Working Group, to introduce the document on initial findings from the Intergovernmental Working Group on the Future Strategic Framework of the Convention. Mr. Muwaya, you have the floor. See ya. No? Where is he? He's in the back. He's going to be speaking from the podium or from the phone. Delegates, as you realize, I'm trying to see if I could push things along, so I went ahead of myself. The gentleman is not ready as yet, so bear with us, please.
Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, I just want to welcome you to this session. As introduced, my name is Stephen Muwaya from Uganda, and I'm a co-chair for the IWG, and I would like to make a brief opening statements. The document before you, ICCD, CRIC 15/2, contains the findings of the work of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the future strategic framework for the Convention. We, the group, are more than pleased to share with you the results of our discussions relating to the new strategic orientation that we collectively would like to pursue and get engaged in starting as soon as COP13 will have considered and adopted the strategy. We are proud, as your representatives, to be able to provide to you a rather clean text, which in any case is exemplifying that despite some divergent views that exist within the group, we were able to pull together and agree to the extent possible on an almost final draft text that we intend to finalize during the third meeting, which we expect will take place immediately after this CRIC in Nairobi. The draft text is included in the annex of the document before you, and it is our ambition that with your help and feedback, which we received today, we will complete our discussions forward the new draft strategy for consideration by parties to COP13. Let me also take this opportunity to remind you of what the COP requested the IWG to do. And this is embedded in Decision 7, COP12, which also established the IWG. The task was to assess the current strategy, consider options for the possible future strategic approach for the convention, and propose an approach the convention should adopt for its future strategic direction and elements that should be included therein. As a result of this decision, the IWG met twice in 2016, this year. The first meeting took place in April, and the group produced a working document that served as a basis for the first draft, which was discussed and improved during the following meeting. The second meeting was convened in July, during which the group agreed on many of the subsections of the text. This is the text that is now before you today for consideration. As already highlighted during COP12, parties believe that there is no reason to reinvent the wheel and design a completely new strategic framework that would bear no resemblance to our old strategy. Quite the contrary, the work that has gone into implementing the UNCCD for the last 10 years has been overall appreciated and provides to us an important stepping stone which we want to build on. While my colleague, the rapporteur, Samuel Contreras, will guide you in more detail through the document and highlight some of the special features of the proposed draft, the proposed draft text, let me point out to you 4 key elements that the group agreed upon and which were the underlying assumptions that we used while conceptualizing this new strategy. First of all, there was consensus in the group of the need to concentrate in the future on implementation rather than institutional processes. Many felt that the precious time and resources available to this convention was in the past used for institutional frameworks at the expense of implementation. This is why we propose that implementation actions on the ground will be key for us in the future. Secondly, we all agree that it is time to deliver on the repeated request for synergies and other processes. We must work towards synergies with other processes and consequently link the UNCCD to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. I would like to also say that this is, where appropriate, to create new opportunities for implementation and financing our convention. Following from this, we propose that the successor to our current strategy would have a lifetime stretching from 2018 to 2030, so as to coincide with the SDG process. Thirdly, we felt it necessary to maintain the strategic objectives of our current strategy because they are still relevant and enable us to create the linkage to the objectives of the SDGs, namely contributing to achievement of a land degradation neutral world. Finally, we proposed to stop reporting on performance indicators and instead enrich the debate on CRIC, which with interactive sessions that feed, that help us to feed into the process by use of narrative reporting on the implementation at national level. Mr. Chair, there are these are four key areas on which we would like to seek your views and opinions. I would now pass on the floor to our rapporteur, who will introduce the draft strategy and give more details to you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair of the Intergovernmental Working Group. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Samuel Contreras from the Philippines. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, it is my honor and privilege to introduce and present to you the initial findings of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the future strategic framework of the Convention, or the draft strategy as contained in the document ICCD/CRIC-15/2. As of the second meeting of the IWG in July 2016, the first draft includes 5 chapters or sections, consists of an introduction,
One second, I cannot see it on the...
It's okay now. Okay.
One second. Just to make it tight. Try not to touch this one.
Okay. As of the second meeting of the IWG in July 2016, the first draft includes 5 chapters or sections, consists of an introduction, a vision, strategic objectives and expected impacts, implementation framework, and monitoring, reporting, and evaluation. Distinguished delegates, Mr. Chairman, please allow me to present the highlights of each chapter or section. Well, basically, the introduction essentially highlights the challenges posed by DLDD in terms of social, economic, and environmental problems, as well as the importance of implementing long-term strategies to address them. It emphasizes the central role of the UNCCD in addressing these issues through several actions, such as capacity building, awareness raising, technology transfer, mobilization of resources, and assistance to parties to implement policies at the national, sub-regional, and regional levels. It also highlights the potential contribution of the strategy to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, particularly Sustainable Development Goal number 15 and Target 15.3. The vision of the strategy basically looks on a future that avoids, minimizes, and reverses desertification, land degradation, and mitigates the effects of drought in affected areas at all levels, consistent with Sustainable Development Goal 15 and Target 15.3 and other interrelated sustainable development goals within the scope of the Convention. Strategic objectives that will guide the action of all UNCCD stakeholders and partners and contribute to achieving the vision were based on the first strategy
with slight amendments. Strategic Objective 2 or 1, to improve the condition of affected ecosystem, promote sustainable land management, and, open bracket, contribute to land degradation neutrality, open bracket, within the scope of the convention, to close brackets. Strategic Objectives 1 or 2, to improve living conditions of affected population. Distinguished delegates, please take note that for strategic objectives 1 and 2, the IWG has not yet decided on which strategic objective should logically come first. Will it be the one that addresses the human welfare or living conditions of affected population, or will it be the one that accounts for the improvement of affected ecosystem? Also, sentences, phrases in brackets are still to be discussed and agreed upon by the group. We have also Strategic Objective 3 to generate global environment benefits through effective implementation of the Convention. And we have Strategic Objective 4 to mobilize financial and non-financial resources to support the implementation of the Convention. Expected impacts for each of these strategic objectives are well indicated in the document. The implementation framework basically defines the roles and responsibilities of the parties, UNCCD institutions, partners, and stakeholders in meeting the above-mentioned objectives. Essentially, the parties bear the main responsibility in the implementation of the strategy. In accordance with their obligation, as stated in the Convention, parties aim to increase mobilization of financial and non-financial resources, take advantage of LDN as an opportunity, and improve existing innovative financial process. In terms of policy and planning, parties intend to develop and implement national, sub-regional, and regional action programs, and establish policies and enabling environment to combat the LDDD. More importantly, action on the ground is pursued through the implementation of sustainable land management and restoration and rehabilitation practices. Meanwhile, the different UNCCD institutions, namely the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention, the Committee on Science and Technology, Global Mechanism, and the Secretariat, are important parts of the implementation framework while they fulfill their respective roles and functions. Under monitoring, reporting, and evaluation, parties report the progress made in the implementation of the strategy through national reports for review by the CRIC and for consideration by the COP. Progress indicators should be reviewed and fine-tuned as necessary and as appropriate, considering the reporting system of the Sustainable Development Goals with reference to the follow-up and review of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Reporting on the implementation framework will be done through qualitative reporting and on voluntary basis until the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention has considered refining the reporting guidelines. The COP will identify, where needed, specific project or specific topics that will be reviewed during sessional and intersessional sessions of the CRIC to ensure that interactive sessions will be organized. In general, Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegate, the main outcomes for the new strategy takes into account the following. One, its contribution to the implementation of the Convention and to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal, particularly Sustainable Development Goal number 15 and land degradation neutrality under Target 15.3. Two, the replacement of operational objectives by implementation framework with narrative reporting replacing performance indicators. And 3, keeping strategic objectives 1 to 4 as they were known in the first strategy with the slight amendments. And 5, the lifespan of the strategy is proposed to be 2018 to 2030 to align it with the Sustainable Development Goal process. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, what I have just presented are the highlights of the initial findings of the Intergovernmental Working Group or the draft strategy as contained in the document ICCD/CRIC 15/2. Thank you and good day.
I thank Mr. Contreras for his statement. I would also like to thank Mr. Mwaya for his statement and for also ably transitioning to his colleague. Thank you. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to begin its general discussion of item 3, sub-item A. In order to do this, I will now turn to our moderator of this session, Mr. Ahmet Senior from Turkey, who is also the chair of the Intergovernmental Working Group to manage the discussion on the agenda item 3A. Before we proceed, however, I would also like to remind delegations to be brief and concise and to limit their interventions to 2 minutes so that the moderator can give the floor to as many speakers as possible until the end of this session. The moderator has the permission to interrupt at the end of the 2 minutes granted. Without further ado, I give the floor to our moderator, Mr. Seniors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, my name is Ahmet Şenyas. I am one of the delegates from Turkey. I have been serving as a co-chair of IWG-FCF, but today I'm very happy to be with you and I will have the responsibility for moderating this session. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, we have heard from the co-chair and the reporter about what IWG was meant to do, how they addressed the specific tasks given to them, and the detail of the draft that is before you for comments. It's my task now to moderate this session and outline the kind of guidance we are seeking from you to help us complete our task. Firstly, let me remind you that we are here to discuss the draft document that will govern our implementation efforts all over the world for this convention up until 2030. In order for it to be successful in this, I believe that focus is a key word that should help us in finalizing the document for COP13. We are confronted with a new reality and opportunities that we need to seize. Focus is key to a structured and targeted implementation. So while we believe that there are issues of relevance that could be included in the strategy, we should be careful not to overburden ourselves with more objectives and a list of outputs that will dilute our effort and make implementation complex. So one of the key aspects that would be valuable for us to know from you is whether we got the focus right on what we collectively want to achieve in the next decade. Secondly, the group was agreeing that linkages to the SDG process, and in particular to target 15.3, which reads, to combat desertification, restore degraded land and soil, including land affected by desertification, drought and floods, and strive to achieve a land degradation neutral world, should be made, but how this would be reflected in the text is still not fully clear. Some members of the IWG argue that we should seek further linkages to the SDG process, apart from those areas that are directly related to land. Some would argue that we have not yet succeeded in linking adequately the LDN concept to our future strategic orientation. Again, others were more cautious, saying that we should not forget the convention over the desire to synergize with other processes. Feedback from you would be very much appreciated on this central issue. Herein, I would like to take this opportunity to thank IWG co-chair, rapporteur, and all members of IWG for their grand efforts to produce this new draft strategy. Besides, I would like to thank staff of Secretariat and GM for their support and strong collaboration during the meetings. The IWG, which includes members from all implementation annexes and other groups, is looking forward to your valuable comments. Please let us have a lively debate about our joint future. May I now invite parties to raise their flags so that we get a first list of speakers. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Brazil, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to congratulate the co-chairs for the excellent report and our IWG rapporteur. We participated in this group, and part of the rationale to keeping a lot of the structure of the previous strategy was, first of all, the diagnostics in this organization have been very well done, but the problem has been the implementation. And secondly, a lot of money and resources have been done to align national action plans. And we don't want to start from scratch like the organization has to throw out the baby with the water from the bath, with the bathwater. And then we throw all this work out, all this cooperation money that went to align our national action plans that are being implemented. We wanted, however, to include the LDN concept within this new strategy. And this is what we've strived to achieve here. So we have kept a lot of the structure in that respect, so that we don't have to realign NAPs, and so we can keep our NAP structure going and have this extra flexibility for those countries who have wished to adopt the LDN concept to build on what already exists and not to start over from scratch. Now let's have to realign our NAPs into that's the general idea. And of course the focus on implementation, so that we're not just producing papers and reports and analyses and consultancy work alone. So that was the short comment that I had to make. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. Eritrea, floor is yours.
First of all, I would like to thank the presenters of the group of Intergovernmental Working Group. It is stated in the document that 15.3, target 15.3, as if it is a new strategy. I understood it. So 15.3 is the LDD as it is, and it was reflected in the document here that still it is under discussion how to report this strategy, how to include with this one. As my understanding, the LDD, it was there, and now we are just setting targets, how to accommodate or deepen our system of implementation and reporting. So I need in this regard some clarification. The other issue is narrative reporting will be replace performance indicators, while strategic objectives be measured mainly through quantitative progress indicators. If it is so, does this affect our original price reporting system? If so, what are we going to do? So the new reporting format for LDN seems as if it is a need. Thank you.
Thank you, Eritrea. South Africa.
Mr. Chairman, South Africa welcomes the report by the IWG on the future strategic framework of the Convention and would like to congratulate the members of this group and the Secretariat for preparing this report that has been prepared for parties to provide comments and inputs. Mr. Chairman, we felt that the preamble of the draft new strategy and it is now should clearly spell out in the future strategy to indicate what SDG 15.3 is all about and further build this strategy on the LDN targets towards 2030. Looking at the title of the strategy, we have seen that the title is still bracketed. So our proposal is that the title that we are in favor of is the UNCCD Implementation Strategy 2018 to 2030 towards the healthy land, noting that the SDGs in their entirety are about present and future generations. In terms of the strategic objectives, when we go through the document, there is elements of what comes first between the people and the ecosystem. As such, our view is that people-related objectives should come first on the new strategy. In addition, we also want to issue, also want the issue of women and youth to be clearly articulated, as they are the ones that are affected by the impacts of DLD globally. The mandate of the Convention is to address the issue of desertification, land degradation, and mitigate the effects of drought. As such, on the expected impacts, we would like to have an expected impact indicator that will address the issue of drought as clearly spelled out in the Convention text. Mr. Chairman, Namibia recently hosted the Africa Drought Conference that resulted in the drought resilience and a prepared Africa framework, and the Windhoek Declaration on Drought. As expected, impact indicator can be drafted, borrowed to that. Mr. Chairman, there is also a need to strengthen the CST program of work to make its element work on the implementation of the new strategy. Mr. Chairman, we hope that these elements will be taken into consideration as and when the group is finalizing its work. I thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. Republic of Korea, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. The Republic of Korea raised the issue of land degradation neutrality through the Changwon Initiative at COP10 and has contributed to moving forward on its discussion. Changwon Initiative supported the LDN pilot project and is supporting the LDN target setting program. I believe such efforts contributed to including the land degradation neutral world in the future we want and the adoption of the new SDGs. Moreover, our efforts also contributed to the adoption of the Decision 2 at COP12, inviting the parties to formulate voluntary national targets to achieve LDN. I am certain that LDN targets should be UNCCD's priority in achieving SDGs by 2030. LDN will provide a guideline to the Convention which aims to address and mitigate impacts of desertification, land degradation, and drought. In that regard, the parties decided to revise the strategy and establish an intergovernmental working group on the future strategic framework of the Convention. The report on the initial findings of the IWG FSF was provided for the review of CRIC 15. However, the report gave little consideration to LDN, or did not even mention LDN. If DLDD and LDN are irrelevant, and if the convention itself does not safeguard LDN, then is UNCCD a convention to address DLDD issues? Ladies and gentlemen, how can we implement the convention without the provision on clear objectives? I believe it needs an overall revision. In the revised report, it should declare that LDN is under the UNCCD's custodian and the UNCCD is the guardian of LDN. It should also declare that convention will use all possible resources and measures to achieve the LDN target by 2030. Who would support us if we are not convinced ourselves? Now it is time for UNCCD to make a choice. Achieving the goals by 2030 is not for the present. It is for the future. We cannot discuss and decide future and the rights and the environment of the future generation only with our current view. I would like to highlight that LDN is future-oriented. It is the future. I believe that we have the wisdom to make our future generation proud of our decision. That wise decision will make UNCCD a strong and powerful convention. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Republic of Korea, distinguished delegates. If you could brief your feedback in 2 minutes, I will be very glad. Thank you very much. Now, floor is yours, Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I am speaking on behalf of the countries of Central and Eastern Europe and under Annex 5. So I'm putting forward the proposals that we had at our regional meeting. We'd like to draw your attention to a few key elements which we feel are particularly significant for our region. There are 6 in all. First of all, the strategy has to take into account and reflect the specific conditions of each region, including the countries of Central and Eastern Europe as in Annex 5, who are involved in the convention. We consider that Decision 8 of COP12, which takes into account the national and regional specificities of countries, should be fully taken account of and reflected in preparation of the strategy and other processes of the convention, and implemented by parties and convention bodies and bilateral and multilateral partners. This is particularly important for our region because although the share of arid drylands in our country isn't very great, drought and land degradations are extremely important for the economy and sustainable development, and the coordination of efforts with them in the framework of our convention is extremely important. The second point is that the countries of Annex 5 are expecting that the new strategy, of course, must encourage and guide parties with regard to combating DLDD in all ecosystems throughout the world. And its main difference from the existing strategy will be in accomplishing a neutral land degradation balance. But here, we're emphasizing this. Our country would like to see the forthcoming strategy as inclusive and will help in the implementation of the convention on this. And we feel that instead of the first strategic aim, there should be something on LDN. Thirdly, the strategy should clearly emphasize the goal of LDN in the key sectors of the text. The readiness and wish of 102 countries to establish national voluntary aims for LDN, including the majority of Annex 5 countries, is something which should not go unmarked in the new strategy. The fourth point, on the question of the relationship between LDN and 15.3, the strategy will be utilized by a broad range of stakeholders, and for this reason, in the preamble to the strategy, we think we should have directly the wording from 15.3 and the land degradation balance should be brought in, and this should also be referred to elsewhere in the text. Fifthly, on the title or name of the strategy, the title needs to be brief, it needs to have the name of the convention, there needs to be the time frame and implementation, and take into account the conditions of each country. It's important in publicising the convention that the title should be right. And now on the sixth point, on the question of the inclusion in the text of the framework within the scope of the convention. We don't think that this makes sense because we're talking about the strategy for this convention. We're not talking about any other strategy. So this wording just overburdens the text and doesn't really help. Thank you.
Thank you, Russia. European Union, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am honored to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We thank the Intergovernmental Working Group on the future strategic framework of the Convention for the work done for deliberation on the first draft, as contained in the report ICCD CRIC 15.2, dealing with the initial findings of the future strategic framework of our Convention. We would like to share two main points. The strategic framework plays an important role in the implementation of the Convention. In order to build on the experience gained so far and to cope with the new challenges ahead of us, a new strategy is needed. We emphasize that the 2030 agenda, including the interlinkages between CCD and other multilateral agreements, have to be addressed in the vision and objectives of the 2018-2030 strategy. This applies in particular to the target 15.3 on desertification and land degradation, which spells out our common vision on the land degradation neutrality. Therefore, to achieve the land degradation neutrality should be one of the main objectives of the new strategy. We also welcome the proposed monitoring approach for the strategic objectives, utilizing the progress indicators already adopted by the Convention and adapting them to the corresponding SDGs indicators where necessary and as far as possible in order to reduce reporting burden and to respect general coherence. The effectiveness of past reporting on performance indicators has been limited. However, the currently proposed narrative format for reporting on the implementation framework needs to be further substantiated. We therefore suggest to stress the need for revising reporting guidelines. It should be mentioned explicitly in the strategy that clear formats, reporting categories, and the corresponding criteria are needed in order to allow country parties and all stakeholders entitled to report to produce a meaningful reporting of implementation activities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, European Union. Tunisia, floor is yours.
At the end, it was very...
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, moderator. We would like to thank the IWG for the work and the products they have come up with. I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you the discussions that we had within the Arab Maghreb Union on this subject. We recommend, first of all, to prioritize the LDN target, which should be in Strategic Objective 1, first and foremost, and we propose and recommend to reformulate that objective say to reach land degradation neutrality by 2030 by improving the ecosystems concerned and having sustainable land management. We also recommend having another look at the order of the impact expected and have 3 moved up to the first place, dropping the word voluntary and say land degradation neutrality targets are set out and adopted for countries. Related measures are identified and implemented, and necessary monitoring systems are established. Since all countries have already adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, and amongst these goals we see land degradation neutrality. So we recommend that this should be an obligation for countries. Also, to be in line with the other expected impacts under the objectives, we recommend to reflect that integration of LDN in the strategic objectives on the mobilization of resources. That is, that for 1 on the mobilization of resources has to clearly mention resources allocated to LDN. Thank you very much for your consideration, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Tunisia. Now, Turkey, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. As Turkey, we want to thank the IWG's efforts to formulate a new strategy of the Convention. We are very pleased to see that a new draft strategy has been prepared in order to enhance the implementation of the UNCCD. Turkey has showed its determination by nominating a member for IWG-FCF. We are also aware that UNCCD is at a turning point. 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, in particular regarding Sustainable Development Goal 15 and Target 15.3, and other interrelated SDGs will be able to be integrated in the new strategy. With this strategy, we would like to see some concrete activities on the ground which are supported by government officials, efficient institutions, scientific community, and local people and private sector as well. On the other hand, although we appreciate the work done by IWG, we have some proposals and questions about the draft strategy. First, we consider that strategy should be clear and brief, addressing all parties. In the text, there are a few repetitions, such as within the scope of the Convention. Since the strategy is a tool for implementation of the Convention, do we have to say within the Convention, within the scope of Convention repeatedly? And also, expected impact for under the improving ecosystem conditions of strategic objections should be added a new impact related to land-based adaptation to climate change. Under the improving living conditions and impact related to reducing migration and improving land ownership should be added accordingly. Under the section 4, implementation framework, maybe we could add some other institutions or bodies, for example, focal points and their responsibilities should be added in the text. As for action on the ground, where concrete activities will be included, will we monitor and report only biophysical activities, or will we be able to monitor new legislations, plans, and institutional improvements in the country? And also, if possible, a glossary should be added to strategy in order to speak the same language. And we are looking forward to mutualizing a new reporting system aligned with the new strategy. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Turkey. Peru, floor is yours.
Well, we have 4 points. The first concerns
the order of the strategic objectives 1 and 2. I think we need to concern that the first paragraph of the Convention establishes or affirms that human beings in affected areas or threatened areas should be in the center of our preoccupations and efforts in the fight against desertification and drought. Point 2 concerns the scope of the Convention. Here it's clear that we're talking about arid, semi-arid, and dry areas. In the Peruvian case, we are not limiting ourselves to these. And we need to consider that they are, however, the areas which require the most effort to be recovered. Point number 3, the document needs to explicitly recognize the main instruments of the Convention, including the National Action Plans. This could and should be included in point 4, policy framework, together with the CRIC's work. The present CRIC has basically limited itself to national reports and needs, I think, to broaden its focus, considering, for instance, national action plans in conformity with CRIC's objectives. Point number 4, it's important to consider as a progress indicator one relationship with strategic objective 4 concerning funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peru. Now I would like to give the floor to Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Switzerland would like to thank the Intergovernmental Working Group for its hard work. We consider the draft strategy as an excellent starting point for this CRIC discussions. The Intergovernmental Working Group was requested at the last COP to take into consideration, amongst others, the text of the Convention, the relevant aspects of SDG 15 and its target 15.3, and relevant decisions taken by the COP. In that sense, Switzerland will not support language in the new draft strategy that does not respect agreed language as discussed at the last COP, especially with regard to LDN and SDG target 15.3. We believe that the strategy first and foremost should contribute to achieve the objective of the Convention, and other targets or other issues such as Agenda 2030 should be at a different level. Furthermore, we believe that the vision should also include poverty reduction and environmental sustainability, as these topics are also highlighted in the strategic objectives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. Now, Swaziland, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking the co-chairs and the IWG group for the work that they've done so far, and it is well appreciated. I will support the statement presented by the Republic of South Africa and would like to add just a few other elements. There is one issue amongst the TORs of the group, which was to assess the implementation of the current strategy. We have not heard what has come out of their assessment. Why I'm raising this, Mr. Chair, is because we've been talking about implementation and reporting, which have been giving us problems, but we have not heard how they've analyzed that. That brings me, Chair, to the issue which has been raised here of the need to anchor the new strategy on LDN target 15.3 based on the targets that we are already setting. already we have more than 100 countries that have joined the program on target setting. To me, it says this is what parties are saying, this is the direction. If we ignore the issue of targets, then the new strategy will also be difficult to implement and difficult to report on, because it will be just like another narrative document which is not giving concrete direction on how we implement. Chair, there is a statement in the document which says the limitations of parties' ability to increase financial resources provided to the convention. To me, this is a negative statement already, saying we are going to a war when we are already defeated. We propose that it should be removed completely from the text of the strategy. Instead, we want to see the issue of the LDN fund, because if we have a strategy, we should know how it would be financed. So the LDN fund should come as part of the strategy. And of course, there is a need for clear linkages with the national action programs. Without any linkages with the national action programs, then we will have a national document without linkages to the action where it is taking place. I thank you, Chair. I thank you.
Thank you, Sivasland. Distinguished delegates, due to the time limit, we are closing the session in the morning now, but I would like to hear the other countries at the afternoon session: Bosnia, Herzegovina, Botswana, Cambodia, Ethiopia, Estonia, Colombia, Argentina, Djibouti, Burkina Faso, Japan, Tanzania, and CSO representative. Thank you very much. Bon appetit. And before closing the session, I would like to give the floor to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegates. I would like to thank the moderator, the presenters, all the delegations that have taken part in this discussion so far. Please allow me to make a proposal regarding the contact group. It is proposed that the CRIC contact group meet today at lunchtime from 1:30 to 3 in room 3. Are there any objections to this proposal? Brazil? Brazil, you have the floor? Oh, mic. Oh, mic isn't working.
Only in the afternoon, or can we also expect an evening session?
I would like to ask the Secretary to respond to.
Also an evening session.
Secretary, respond.
Yes, there will be a plan also evening session. This is just to advance the work of the contact group.
I take it that there are no objections, so the meeting will go on as planned. Distinguished delegates, we have actually run out of time. We'll resume this afternoon at 3 p.m. to continue discussions on this agenda item 3A. May I remind you that only the countries that have been invited or request to speak this afternoon will be allowed to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, this meeting is adjourned.
So we need to, sorry.
Oh, yes. Sorry.